So today we're just going to dive right in. We're in lesson 3, and let me get mine in front of me. Last week we covered the right side. Whose side are you on? And the point of the lesson was we are to be on God's side. All right, there we go. So lesson 3, and we're going to start off the right issue. Point number 1 on your outline. God's ways are not our ways. God's ways are not our ways. And then letter A underneath, the plans God gives us to follow seem to be foolish. And if you will flip to Joshua, where your first ribbon is, we're going to read Joshua chapter 6. We're going to read verses 1 through 5. Now Jericho was straitly shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men of valor, and ye shall compass the city, all ye men of war, and go round about the city once. Thus shalt thou do 6 days, and 7 priests shall bear before the ark 7 trumpets of ram's horns. In the 7th day ye shall compass the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow with the trumpets, and it shall come to pass that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city shall fall down flat, and the people shall ascend up every man straight before him. So to summarize, this is the battle plan that Joshua was given by the Lord for the battle plans against Jericho. And just to kind of summarize what we just went through, I've got them here in my notes, but this isn't in front of you. Compass the city of Jericho 6 days. Take the Ark of the Covenant with you. 7 priests are going to bear 7 ram's horns before the ark. On the 7th day, compass the city 7 times. The priests will blow the trumpets of the ram's horns, and then hearing the trumpets, all the people will shout loudly, causing the walls to fall. And when the walls fall, the people will charge in to take the city. So imagine you're Joshua. You're this great military leader, this great soldier, and you're given these instructions from God as your battle plans. And one important detail that's not mentioned, that we haven't gone over yet in the text, is that they were told when they were circling the city to keep completely silent the entire time that they're doing this. So as foolish as these plans seem to anyone, especially a military leader, this is not the only time in Scripture that God has asked one of his leaders, has given them unconventional battle plans. So keep your place here, and you're going to flip to that passage in Judges, chapter 7. And then you'll see in your notes what we're going to. These are the battle plans he gave to Gideon. Judges 7, and we're in verse 1. Then Jerubbaal, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him rose up early and pitched beside the well of Herod, so that the host of the Midianites were on the north side of them, by the hill of Moreh, in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, The people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, Mine own hand hath saved me. Now therefore go to, proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 20 and 2,000, and there remained 10,000. So before a great battle, no wartime general has ever said, and certainly no one other than God has ever said, you have too many to win this battle. We need to make this army smaller. But he did, and he gave Gideon specific and strange instructions on how to whittle the army down to a mere 300 men. And if you remember the story, it's by how they lapped the water up. The ones that would bring the water up to their mouth with their hand and lap the water, that's how they narrowed the army down. So an army of 32,000 was reduced to 300 to defeat an enemy that's described as a great multitude without number. So, sound foolish? It gets worse. So, we're still in Judges. We're going to read verse 12. And the Midianites and Amalekites and all the children of the east lay along the valley like grasshoppers for multitude, and their camels were without number. In the sand by the seaside for a multitude. Skip down to verse 16. And he that divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put a trumpet in every man's hand, and empty pitchers and lamps within the pitchers. And he said unto them, Look on me, and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the outside of the camp, it shall be that as I do, so shall ye do. When I blow with the trumpet, and all that are with me, then blow ye the trumpets also on every side of the camp, and say, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So to summarize Gideon's battle plans: silently surround the city. Sounds familiar. Do as I do. So on Gideon's cue, they were to break the pitchers, holding the lamps in their left hand, trumpets in the right. And then Gideon and his men would blow their trumpets, signaling to the other groups to blow theirs. And then they were to cry out, The sword of the Lord and Gideon. So this should sound familiar. Surround the enemy, trumpets, shouting. And let's not forget, I've got in there in your notes, God sending Moses out of Egypt with no plan of escape, running him right up against the Red Sea, and then also sending David to fight a giant with a slingshot. Why does God provide his soldiers with such unconventional battle plans? The good news is we don't have to guess, because in Gideon's case, the Lord told him why. So let's look again at what the Lord said. Judges chapter 7, verse 2, and this is your key verse on your outline. And the Lord said unto Gideon, The people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, Mine own hand hath saved me. Letter B on your outline. As foolish as God's plans may seem, the plans themselves are not the issue. The plans themselves are not the issue. So again, the theme of this section is the right issue. Point number 2, there is no other way. And then I'm not going to sing, don't worry. Trust and obey, for there is no other way to be happy in Jesus but to trust and obey. So this is the right issue, our trust and our obedience, which we talked quite a bit about that last week, our obedience. So God told Gideon he wanted his people to trust and obey him so that he gets all the glory. And this is the right issue, to trust and obey. Gideon did. Joshua did. So as you ponder these examples that we've covered, consider how this might apply to us. Think about the battle plans that he's given us as soul winners. Key verse on your outline, 1 Corinthians 1, 18 through 29. And Paul covered this a little bit in week 1, talking about how our plan seems foolish. And that's the point that we're making here with these examples. So verse 18, For the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us which are saved it is the power of God. And we'll just, verse 21, also on your outline. For after that in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God, but it pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. I was going to read the whole passage, 1 Corinthians 18 through 29. It says it there in your outline that we're going to read that. Just for the sake of time, we're not going to do that. But at the end of the passage, I'll just read the last, I'll start in verse 27 if you're there. How that God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And that was one of our soul-winning rules for week 1. God hath chose the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. The base things of the world and the things which are despised hath God chosen, yea, and the things which are not, to bring to naught the things that are, and this is the point here, that no flesh should glory in his presence. The Apostle Paul, also in Corinthians, we won't flip there, but I'll read it. He said, For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of. For necessity is laid upon me, yea, woe is me, if I preach not the gospel. So there on your outline, the battle plan for soul winners, it's really just got one point. And that little quote there, Paul Schrader made that up. He said it'd make a nice billboard. We could just put out there, I gave you one job to do, Jesus. And he didn't really say that, but battle plan for soul winners, preach the cross, the gospel. Explain the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ to the lost. So for those that don't know the Lord, the preaching of the cross is foolishness. And we've been commanded to combat the lost world with a seemingly unconventional battle plan. Just like when you're at work, and he's talking about handing out the tracts to all these people at work. It's like, I'm just supposed to go around the cubicle there and tell Steve about the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's it. That's the plan. Yes, that's it. That's the plan that we're given. That's the only reason we're here. And God wants us to trust him, like Joshua and like Gideon. He wants you to trust the plan, and he wants you to obey him. So when you go out into battle, remember Jericho, remember Gideon, and simply sharing the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ from the Bible may not seem like enough, and I put this in your notes. It may seem awkward and powerless, but we know that it isn't, because the Bible literally says it is the power of God. So remember, the right issue, it's not the plans, it's to trust and obey. Okay, so our next topic, we've covered the right side, the right issue, and now we're on to the right question. Point number 1. Okay. And this is a quote. I meant to look up this guy's name because I don't even know who it is, but Brian quotes him a few times in the book. His name is Peter Drucker. So hopefully he's not a heretic. But he's got a good quote here. The most serious mistakes are not the result of wrong answers. The truly dangerous thing is asking the wrong question. And that's what we're covering now, the right question. But the truly dangerous thing is asking the wrong question. Key verse, Joshua 5, verse 14 on your outline. And we talked about this last week. Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? So wisely, Joshua chose to be on the right side, and although he was given commands that may have seemed foolish, he demonstrated that the right issue was not the plans themselves, but whether or not he would trust and obey. When the Lord answered Joshua's question, he provided him with 2 key things here on your outline. Number 1, a promise for victory. A promise for victory. And actually, I've got underneath both of these points, we're going to read Joshua 6, 2 through 5, and that's what these 2 points come from that passage. So I'll just start reading Joshua 6, verse 2, and then we'll stop after that. And the Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thine hand Jericho, and the king thereof, and the mighty men. So he had a promise for victory. Number 2, he provided him with a plan for victory. A plan for victory. So I'll tell you what, we're not going to read this passage again for time's sake. We already just read it. But this was, I summarized at the beginning, the battle plans that Joshua was given. 6 days. He was to circle the city with the ark, 7 priests, 7 ram's horns. Then on the 7th day, they're going to circle it 7 times. The priests blow the horns. Then they all shout loudly, walls fall, then they all go charging in. So we already read that. But what's really interesting is when you take a look at how Josh relays the message to his soldiers. So we're going to look at that. This is Joshua relaying the Lord's plans to his men and what we can learn from it. So we are going to read Joshua 6 through 11. And Joshua, the son of Nun, there's an opportunity right there for an awful pastor joke. Called the priests and said unto them, Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear the 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord. And he said unto the people, Pass on, and compass the city, and let him that is armed pass on before the ark of the Lord. And it came to pass, when Joshua had spoken unto the people, that the 7 priests bearing the 7 trumpets of ram's horns passed on before the Lord, and blew with the trumpets, and the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed them. And the armed men went before the priests that blew the trumpets, and the reward came after the ark, the priests going on and blowing the trumpets. And Joshua had commanded the people, saying, Ye shall not shout, nor make any noise with your voice, neither shall any word proceed out of your mouth until the day I bid you shout. So just imagine that. They're circling the city for 6 days, not making a peep. Continuing, Then shall ye shout. So the ark of the Lord compassed the city, going about it once, and they came into the camp and lodged in the camp. So there are 2 very important details that Joshua left out. And the Lord revealed to Joshua in the plan, he revealed to him that the plan was, this is on your outline here, a guaranteed success. So he already knew the plan was going to work. He told Joshua that. He told him that he gave Jericho and the king into his hand. So he knew it was a guaranteed success. And he also, number 2, told him the plan was going to take exactly 7 days. So he not only knew the plan was going to work, but he knew how long. He knew it was going to work in exactly 7 days. So it's reasonable to assume that among all the questions asked, the people were wondering how long they were going to have to keep this up. And more importantly, whether or not the plan was even going to work. And it appears to be a significant omission on Joshua's part, as these 2 questions tend to be the ones that are most often asked. Modern day evangelism is no exception to this. And I put this in your notes. With few exceptions, the things that all evangelistic and church planting growth books have in common is their attempt to answer these 2 underlying questions. And I can attest to this. I've read a few of them, and they all do this. They attempt to answer this question. Does it work? How long is it going to take? Does it work? How long is it going to take? And being the pragmatic people that we are, in the West especially, we often begin with these 2 questions when we're asking those that know for the answers to succeed in nearly any challenge in life. And they're good questions to ask most of the time. So naturally, when it comes to our mission of soul winning, we start by asking the same exact 2 questions. In your notes, Joshua leaves out the answers to these questions in that passage, Joshua 6 through 11. And that should tell us something. It should tell us that we're asking the wrong question. So as a Christian, you're commanded to preach the gospel. He has given you a plan, and you see that's all that Joshua's men had. All they had was the plan. They didn't know if the plan was going to work. They didn't know how long it was going to take. All they know was what they were told to do. And the important note in this lesson is that you are not Joshua in this scenario. You are Joshua's men. The results are not your department. Your job is to do what you are told. In your notes there, we cannot begin with pragmatic questions to which we cannot have definitive answers, like the amount of time that's going to be spent, or is this going to work? We must begin with the right question, like Joshua did. What did he tell us to do? That's on your outline there. That is the answer. We must begin with the right question. What did he tell us to do? Point number 2, if we begin with pragmatism, does it work? How long is it going to take? Our expectations not being met will lead us away from the explicit command. And this is something, too, I think many of us are probably familiar with. You become disillusioned, you become discouraged, you've been at it for a while, and you're not getting the results that you want to see, and you just decide to give up. You stop doing what you were commanded to do. Key verse, Mark 16:15, and he said unto them, Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. So, considering this verse, he commanded us to go and preach the gospel, it says, to every creature. So the first part of that command, this is on your outline, the first part of that command is to go. So we know our obedience begins with us going, which may look 100 different ways, but whatever idea you come up with, it has to involve going to the lost. The plan's not to make them come to you. Our second part of that command is to preach the gospel. To preach the gospel. So we know our obedience requires words coming from our mouths, and those words are specific. We're to speak about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ to every creature. And there's many ways we can obey what he told us to do, and it depends on our location and our demographics. I got this on your outline there. So prayerfully search for ways God is leading you, but first remember, the leading begins with asking the right question, and that is, what did he tell us to do? So we've covered the right side, the right issue, the right question, and now we're going to move into what I thought was the most salient point in going through this section, the right measure. Because this is really something we get hung up on and why we get discouraged. So point number one, being a soul winner means dealing with a lot of rejection. And the reality is when you're trying to witness to somebody, it may take a long time to win somebody to Christ. In the book that we're kind of used as a framework for this, he was at it for years, with scarcely any results. He had like 5 people in his church. I mean, I can't imagine how discouraging that would be. We can't be discouraged, and a lot of it comes from having the wrong measure. So in your notes there, this can be very discouraging because we want success. And if this is you, it's likely that your main problem is not your method, although there are bad methods. Your main problem is your measure. So letter A, you need to have a biblical measure for success. And then I included on your notes there to recognize that success has a wide spectrum. Those are just some examples. Like if you're out soul winning, somebody was willing to talk to me, I didn't get the finger, I got to share the gospel, we didn't get rained on, but it can go all the way to someone received Christ, they came to church more than once, they want to get baptized, they came to midweek Bible study, they want to get discipled, they want to join me soul winning. So there's a huge range of success when we consider evangelizing. Letter B, we should not overemphasize the metric of attendance. We should not overemphasize the metric of attendance. The most common metric for success in the church, especially in the United States, is attendance. He used a phrase in the book, I'm not really familiar with it because I'm not a preacher, but they say nickels and noses. And he says when you meet with other pastors, the most common question that they ask among themselves when they're talking about the churches, how many numbers are you running? Which, I mean, it's the same thing in the business world. I mean, I'm probably going to think this is kind of morbid, but even when I go to conventions and stuff, we'll say how many families do you take care of this year? They don't phrase it the way you thought I was going to say. But I mean, that is how we see things in the business world, and that's the most common question among pastors when they're asking about each other's churches. We all want to see more people in church on Sunday, but is this the criteria by which we will be judged when we stand before Christ? On your outline there, financial blessings and church attendance are never suggested as a measurement of individual or church success in Scripture. And I have a note there, church attendance is good. I'm not saying that it's not. However, the overemphasis on this metric has made the new mission of the church to invite people to church. And I picked a bad day to do that. Inviting people to church also is a good thing, so don't stop doing that. But the mission of the church, the mission of the Christian, is not to fill up a room. Flip to Acts. Keep your ribbons where they are. Acts chapter 14. We're going to start in verse 26. And thence sailed to Antioch from whence they had been recommended to the grace of God for the work which they fulfilled. And when they were come and had gathered the church together, they rehearsed all that God had done with them and how he had opened the door of faith unto the Gentiles. And there they abode long time with the disciples. So this is one of many, I didn't list, I probably should have put some cross-references, but they're basically talking about what God had done for them and they're glorying in that. So Paul was charged to reveal the doctrines of the church to us in the Word. And his story begins in Acts 9, but it's in chapter 13 he was sent from Antioch with Barnabas to go win souls, make disciples, and plant churches. I put there on your outline. The attendance of these churches, just like the passage we read, is never mentioned. And that's a strange thing to omit if it was considered any kind of measure for success, the attendance. We find the same thing in his church epistles. He certainly encourages us to attend church because we know in Hebrews it says, forsake not the assembling together of yourselves. But he never addresses how many people are attending these churches. In your notes, again, we find the same with Paul's pastoral epistles, no mention of attendance, and surprisingly, neither Timothy nor Titus are given a strategy or principles for numerical church growth. Not a word. Even though all these books that we read, they're just hyper-focused on that. I know this sounds surprising, but if numbers are the metric, well, if numbers are the metric, then Joel Osteen, we should be taking lessons from Joel Osteen and Steve Furtick and all that, right? If numbers are the metric, then Noah was a failure. Jeremiah was a miserable failure. And at the sake of sounding blasphemous, I'll say this, even Jesus Christ himself, numbers-wise, was pretty mediocre. I mean, 3.5 years, and he had 120 people, which by today's standards, in your notes, biblically, it would be difficult to support numbers as an accurate measure for success. Biblically, it would be difficult to support numbers as an accurate measure for success. So the problem's not success. The problem is not knowing how to measure success. Again, inviting people to church is a good thing. We're not discouraging that. Church attendance is a good thing. We all want to see people come to church. But if cold, hard numbers are not the right measure for success, then what is? And if you haven't noticed already, there's been a common thread running through the last week, even week 1, week 2, and today. And we keep coming back to it. Let's see how many people are paying attention. The right measure for success is, what'd you say? The right measure for success is obedience. So this is from Joshua 1, we read last week, the key verse. In the book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but this is on your outline, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein, for then shalt thou make thy ways prosperous, and then shalt thou have good success. And we talked about obedience equals success. Joshua was obedient to the Lord. On your outline, a farmer sows seeds, those seeds are watered, but only God can make the crops grow. So it's the same thing with soul winning. Key verse, 1 Corinthians 3:6. I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So, and we know Jesus said, no man come to me except the Father which hath sent me draw him. So you have absolutely no control over whether someone chooses to receive Christ. That's between them and the Lord. There's only one thing you do have control over. This is in your notes. That is your obedience. Our obedience is our measure for success. The results are not our department. And that leads us to our next soul winning rule. Our measure for success is obedience. I'm just going to make you write that over and over and over again. Not results. It's obedience, not results. And you don't need to flip there because I'm running over. James 1, verse 22, I've got it there on your outline. Be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in the glass. For he beholdeth himself and goeth his way, and straightway forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty and continueth therein, and be not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. So having the right measure for success, our obedience, it's very freeing. It takes a lot of pressure off of us. And I put it in your notes. You always know when you get there. It's easy to track, and it's something over which you have complete control. So when you look back over the last week, if you can say that you share the gospel as you were able to do so, well, that was a successful week. And if you look back over the last week and you can't say that, well, then that's not a successful week. And a recap from last week and this week. Number one, the Lord is not on your side, but you should be on his side. 2, the real issue is not the plan, but it is to trust and obey. Number 3, the right question is not will it work or how long will it take? It is what did he tell us to do, which is preach the gospel. The right measure of success is not numbers, it is obedience. And that's all you need to worry about is your obedience to sow seeds, and the results are God's department. And then, of course, the points of last week and this week, the consistent theme is obedience, obedience, obedience.